already feel like I got 10 years back, just doing the things that we're doing and things that I didn't think I'd do anymore.
Right.
And it's incredible because we've been around about the same time in law enforcement. I like to call it the golden era. Like everybody who's been in law enforcement, they think the generation before them were tough, and the ones that came after are a bunch of wussies. So I think that the time that we started and coming in when we did and making it through the non-technology days to the technology days, that's an era that will never be duplicated again.
Yeah. Well, once again, I want to thank you for bringing me on your show. Let me speak on my future endeavors of starting up a podcast, and that is Seashell Podcast.
We will be tuning in. It'll be on all social media platforms, and you're an interesting guy. People are going to love what you have to say.
Appreciate that.
And looking back on your career, kind of like I think we might have had a conversation about things you were able to do, like when you got started and how you learned, as far as what I don't see today in the troops is a lot of opportunities to use your critical thinking. I think back in the day that you were able to manage where you worked and deal with the people that you had to deal with, and you had to develop your own style.
Right.
And I think everything's a little bit more mechanical now, and not even going on a tangent, but as technology comes along, it's kind of like, well, I don't really care what he has to say, let me see the body cam footage. And that used to not be the case. Your reputation was your brand that you did not want to tarnish. So integrity, honesty, and all those things, they just went without saying.
Well, what the things that we learn as lawmen in our prior careers, when you speak on critical thinking, how can we share that with our audience and help them understand that what a lot of critical thinking is just basic common sense.
It's all common sense.
Basic common sense. I'm just going to say it. I was going to talk around it, but it's just basic common sense.
Yeah.
So how you think that we can introduce that to folks and help them understand that you should be doing this every day?
Well, it's kind of to serve and protect. That was our last show. I think you said that, and it set some trigger off my mind because it's such a cliche thing to say when you're a cop. But what exactly who are you serving, and what are you protecting?
Right.
It varies, and that doesn't mean I came with that attitude back in the day, and my little wake up call to the real world, and it was a domestic, and it was some wife got her eyes blackened, and same old story, and hey, you know what, I'm protecting, so I run over and grab Mr. whoever, dirtbag, I'll say for the sake of argument, handcuff him. Next thing I know, I'm in a chokehold. She's got me in a chokehold. You know why she's got me in a chokehold?
Taking her man home.
Yeah, and I turned my back on her because I thought I was doing that serving and protecting stuff. That's not always your role. You're getting into situations where it just happened that she was choking me, but she could have done anything because I had already taken my attention totally off of her because I'm thinking I'm doing quote unquote the right thing.
Right.
But I'm not in these people's lives. I'm not in their business, and
you don't know the value he is to her.
Right.
At that particular time in her life. Now, none of us condone domestic violence, and none of us condone someone staying with someone just because.
Right.
But we know that happens.
But it's called believe half of what you see and half of what you hear. And then you can roll on from there. But you take things for face value. Like I see a lot of things. Like how many calls have you gone to where they've been exactly what they went out as?
A lot of them was NR, and NR is no report.
Yeah, and mainly because it was, hey, I'm going to call the cops. I've gone to, roommates one roommate ate somebody else's rice, they call the cops for that.
It's funny you said that. I've had a call like that before.
Yeah.
You didn't see my name on that box of Chinese food?
Exactly. Somehow it's always rice. What's up with that?
Right. Why'd you take the last piece of pizza?
Yeah.
Ain't never anything I like greens and cornbread.
But did you ever think you were gonna call the cops for stuff like that?
No. I just chalk it up as, I should have left it in there more than 3 days.
The thing is about the job mainly is that you're problem solving.
Right.
That's the thing we were talking about. And you want to treat people fair. And
Right.
treating people fair kind of comes from your background,
Mm-hmm.
your personal background. You can be trained in this, that, and other, but your personal background and how you grew up and how you were treated by the police or by other citizens. And sometimes you've been in a vulnerable position where, I'm sorry, it sounds like everybody can voice their opinions, but maybe like 20, 25 years ago, you could not so much
Mm-hmm.
and have police be on your side.
It's funny you said problem solving, helping people through their situation.
Mhm.
We almost can be considered mediators.
Absolutely. That's
Not everybody needs to go to jail.
not everybody has to go to jail, but you get into that police culture. When you come in, police culture is based on stats.
Yes.
Well, how many people you put in jail today? How many this? How many that? It was never. That gets back to your discretion,
Right.
and like you said, not everybody needs to go to jail.
I never believed in stats.
No, me neither.
I heard it being said very often. I worked with folks that believed in stats, but what I felt I needed to do was go out and serve the community.
Right.
Getting right back to it.
Yeah, taking somebody's freedom away and throwing them in jail because you don't have the stats to make your supervisor happy is not the way to police. And it was that way for many moons.
Yeah.
And I'm talking like, decades, not just something that is just coming up way before our time.
Well, we understand that stats generates revenue.
It shouldn't, but it does. Like how many people you got in your jail,
Right.
how many, look at the police stats amaze me. And I'm gonna go off on a tangent and talk about police stats for a minute because no matter what part of the country you are listening to or watching on the news, crime in every department, whether it's a city or a county, crime is down by 25% everywhere in the United States all the time.
All the time.
Never a spike in crime. It's always down 25%. They get this arbitrary number and it's like, oh, we've had 50 murders in this town, but
Right.
this year we've only had 40, so crime is down. It's like
Yeah.
that. No, you're still having things. It's
You're
just
still having things happening, man. It's just not. It's not in the category that was once a problem. Now we've
Right.
moved on to a different problem.
Yes, there is things called home invasions,
Right.
and all of a sudden this, that, and other. But
Yes.
yeah, stats are, oh my gosh, they're just so subjective.
Good point. During COVID time, police weren't moving around as much as they were on any other day.
No, absolutely not.
It was more about health and welfare then. We need to protect our troops because if we have two people that leave the squad because they had COVID, that can be 20-30% of your squad.
Easy, yeah, everybody stay away from each other. I mean, law enforcement was not that active during the COVID because they couldn't be. I mean, I was still out
These are
there.
things that we internally we weren't really sharing with the public.
No.
However, the public wasn't moving around as much, so we weren't getting those calls that we were getting. But I wasn't in the local law enforcement.
Right.
I know that you guys were generating a lot of domestic calls.
Are you kidding me? They were a perfect time to get Charlie out of the house and right now, and that was it.
What we were getting on the federal side was supervised release problems where they were domestic related.
Right.
You know,
There were a lot of domestic flare-ups, we'll call them,
Right.
because everybody's stuck at
flare-ups.
home.
Everybody's stuck at home.
Yeah, and it was crazy because people should have seen it coming.
Right.
And they were like, especially in our unit, they were like, well, what are you guys doing? Because you're not evicting people and nobody's repoing any cars or all the stuff that nobody even knew we did. It's like, but yeah, but look at the domestic violence injunctions freaking skyrocketing and everybody, because they're home. Everybody's home.
Everybody's home.
They're not going anywhere. So it was just another thing.
I'm glad we made it through that.
It was bad. It was a lot of and a lot of good information and a lot of misinformation. And it's kind of like at the end of the day, you just want to protect your troops and your
Right.
friends. And it's like, and the public. I mean, you can't. I mean, hindsight's a lot of people suffered physical complications because of
Right.
that. And it's kind of like you don't want anybody to jeopardize their health based on misinformation.
We learned a lot about ourselves, both personally and professionally, during that period. And I hate to say this, out of bad things, you can get some good things out of
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
You can change the way you think or the way you act and way you can justify the change.
A lot of people went through some sort of depression for staying home.
Mm-hmm.
We went to certain shifts and I realized I didn't know how to sit home. It was like
Oh, yeah.
turning your brain off and just, I'm like, wow, this is where I live. And
Well, the opposite of that is a lot of people were working remote, working at home.
right.
And then when it was time for them to come back to work, they was like, I don't want to go back to work. That stresses me out. But we found out that, hey, you know what? Some jobs can be worked remote, and some can't.
And a lot of that won't go back to the way it was. And I think the only ones that really suffered as far as maybe long term was maybe the children.
Mm-hmm.
And I just one of those people that believes that human interaction is very important, especially in those formative years.
Not knocking, homeschooling, but
Right.
kids should interact. And I don't want to talk too much on it because I didn't have my children homeschool and I don't know enough about it, but
Right.
I do know that
Human interaction
human interaction is very important.
Yeah, it's something you're going to need eventually.
Right.
And and I get educating kids properly and everything, but there's it's multifaceted.
Right.
And I guess a lot of people realize that, but it was a time that hopefully we never have to go through again.
Man, I hope not.
But you just have that experience of going through that, and the next time that it happens, if it did happen, hopefully everybody would just handle it a lot better than they did the first time.
Yeah. In a perfect world, where do you think we are right now as far as, we're on the outside now, we gotta admit that to ourselves.
The outside looking in as far as that profession.
Yeah, I hate to say, I don't wanna be a Monday morning quarterback, but.
Well, it's kind of, a lot of law enforcement, sometimes it is quarterbacking. You might not want to call it that, but it's kind of necessary for training purposes.
I'm gonna look for a different phrase than Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah, because it's not. It's like certain things you do need to talk about, and a lot of things can be handled a different way. Or what I noticed on it was just things I've seen on the news. People think law enforcement is the same all over the country, and it's not. It's not the same for even in the same county. Municipalities do things different. County do, there's so many different entities that do different things that there's no uniformity, nor should there be, because society is different. There's you can take several Florida counties. Gilchrist County is not like Miami-Dade.
Oh, well, I'll just, let's break the state of Florida down in threes.
Mm-hmm.
You got North, Middle, and Southern Florida.
Right.
I've worked in all three on the federal level, and I know that it's different policing.
Almost like different states.
Yeah.
Florida has 2 different time
It's-
zones. What do
you
you
know,
think?
Yeah, the ideology in some areas is different than the others, you know, I mean, that's how, well, like, some people like to say that's how it is. You know, it is what it is, but it doesn't always have to be that way.
Yeah, but you also have the people that are, the politicians in the towns, and normally they're, uh, I always call like people named after the roads or land, or they're all like family this and that. You have this family, this and that, and that makes that area not change.
Yeah,
And
the tradition.
yeah, we still live in an era of, I think because of where you've gone in your career and even the things I've done only in one spot, I kind of did this multifaceted, just done a lot. It wasn't just like patrol, it's like
Yeah, you
learning
moved
how
around the
things work.
department.
Yeah, and done different things that a lot of people haven't done, and it opens your eyes.
Right,
It's not
you're exposed to different things.
different people, different kinds of people, and certain things like certain people don't have to deal with.
Right.
I got to work with different entities, and
Different cultures, let's just put it out there.
different cultures, and some things that you can relate to and you can have a better understanding of. When 9/11 happened,
Right.
9/11 happened, and you had friends going to working off duty like at the mosque, and getting the perspective of a Muslim living in the country, that
The Jewish communities,
kind of what's going on.
synagogues and all that, yeah. I would actually, before I left, Orange County, I worked, up there on the north side of the Maitland area, up in that area. Off duty, and I did a lot of off duty jobs for that community, for the, Jewish, synagogues and all that. So, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying.
It's just like, okay, well,
And I didn't know they were there.
I was gonna say, it exposes you. Yeah, I didn't know how many like mosques there were in our county,
yes.
and actually talking to people and realizing that, that old, just the stereotypical, everybody's this, everybody's that. It's like, no, you're an American that goes, wow, this is something that horrible happened, because you're looking, something bad happens, you're immediately looking to place blame on something you want to believe to be true.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just.
The great thing about America is that we're a melting pot, whether we want to or not.
Exactly. But here's the thing, here's the transition of the best examples I could always give is like back in the day, things always catch up, because back in the day, I've run into people that you go in their house, they hadn't left in months because they weigh 700-800 pounds. And then later on, you see a show. It's called My 600-Pound Life.
That was one of my calls.
I'm saying, it's like every cop's call, and then all of a sudden, hey, another one. Look at this guy. He's a effing slob, and look at this crap. And then like a few years later, Hoarders. That's a show called Hoarders.
Yeah.
Now it's like these things that you see before.
Before the shows came out.
My Dusty Rhodes is coming out.
Right.
We were seeing things before they were fashionable.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, transgender, it's like.
That didn't even disturb me before it became popular.
It's
like,
like,
okay, yeah, I saw that the other day on Orange Blossom Trail.
Thank you. It's like, it's just, all the things that have everybody gasping now. It's like, this is not new.
But you know what it is? You know what it is, sir? Is our minds are open to things.
Right.
We don't necessarily, it's not necessarily, you're forcing me to like this. No, you're exposed to it because it's in your community.
It's people.
It's people. That's all it is. It's people.
It's people, and you don't have to eat dinner with them. You don't have to go to the same church.
You have to coexist.
Yeah. And there's some people hate people that they will never ever meet. But yet they have a horrible opinion of them.
Do not have an understanding of them, and refuse to have an understanding of them.
Yeah, and that's fine. But if you don't understand something, then you probably shouldn't talk about it.
It's like the different counties. You have Orange, Polk, Hillsborough, Osceola. They're all different counties.
All different counties, all different people,
all different people, all different,
procedures.
yeah. And I love it. I love the fact that I lived in Orange, I lived in Hillsborough County, I lived in Dade, I lived in Jacksonville, and now I live in Polk County. A lot of people say, "Do you really want to live out there in Polk County?" I was like,
Polk County's great.
I like Polk County. I like fresh air.
Fresh air.
I like to know that the people are watching over my community. You know, not that they weren't watching over the other ones, but I know that they're neighborly here.
Yeah, and you got some genuine people. Like, I'll always applaud the sheriff of Polk.
Give it up to Mr. Grady Judd.
He's legit. I like people who they walk the walk.
He talk the talk.
Yeah, and he stays on point. There's
Yes.
no
Yeah.
There's no.
He's no deviate. He's not deviating, and he's not showing favoritism. We're not plugging the sheriff, but we are plugging the sheriff in his work here. But yes, he does a great job for his community.
I have a sheriff on the shelf at my house.
Okay.
I went down to the substation. Yeah, I'm not. That's about as up as I am. Law enforcement. I will go get a selfie with
Right.
Sheriff Judd if I ever ran into him. I
know-
would probably geek out a little bit.
Last time I saw sheriff was in DC a few years back. Police Memorial Week in May. I tried to attend. I haven't attended in the last couple of years. I was on the critical incident response team for our agency, and it was great joy and serving on that community for deputies and administrative personnel who are dealing with things, shootings, incidents that's happened, and that gets into the mental part of what we do. And I saw him there, and it made me proud being a sheriff, being a deputy in Florida, and seeing other deputies come up for that event, because there was a lot of agencies that didn't come.
Yeah,
but he was always there.
I went to. I think it was before I retired. I went to the gym early in the morning, about 6:30, and I was going down one of the little country roads, and he was out there on a scene, and it wasn't like a newsworthy scene. He was just out.
Right.
And I was like, okay, and it was just that maybe happened once upon a time, but it's a rarity these days.
Well, Sheriff Kevin Berry, who used to be our sheriff back in the day, he used to come out every Friday. Every Friday we see him out there.
That.
So what's he doing out here?
Yeah.
Then you get nervous, like, oh, did I do something wrong? No, man, you're doing your job. This is what I do.
and that's a once upon a time being connected with the community.
Right.
But it was some of it was a different time. The world wasn't as crowded.
Right.
And you lead by example. That was more the lead by example type. I mean, here it was kind of everything we were saying. It's kind of like it's almost like I wouldn't call it a throwback.
Right.
But it was refreshing.
Yeah.
There's still a semblance of good guys and bad guys.
Right.
And I'll just stick in this county and people stay on point. There's,
Right.
If something's bad, we'll talk about something bad,
Right. Yeah.
and it's not being judgmental. Some people are just bad. There are just some evil people in the world. It's not a great percentage, but when you see it, you should call it out.
You call it.
Yeah, don't just sit there and go, oh, well, no, there's sometimes it's just really bad.
Oh, that's outside there.
Okay, I thought somebody was coming in there. But, it's just, that all comes back to leadership. And you want to see your bosses let you work and do your thing.
So, how do you think that, see, we're at that point now, again, we talk about these points. We're doing this podcast together, and we're eventually gonna figure out a name. I don't know, Kevin Charlie podcast, I don't know, but we're streamlining about tying in our previous or our experiences, both life and professional. what kind of topics do you think that we can generate from our audience, from our listeners, where they can call in and ask us what they want? I mean,
Well, just even on my show, I got like a email address, like definitely welcome questions, because a lot of people, they do have questions. And it may be something you've seen on the news, that maybe you want uh, you want an honest opinion. Now, we're not here to cop-splain anything.
no.
We're not here to bash anything, or it's just gonna be what it is. It's like,
Right.
it all depends on what the question is.
And sometimes you're gonna get the answer that you don't want.
Right, yeah.
Because I'm gonna be candid about it. I don't care if you don't like the answer, it's gonna be the answer that what it is. And it may cut both ways. It may sound like we're not being pro-law enforcement, and then it may sound like we are being pro-law enforcement, but the way I've always tried to live my life is I don't like sugarcoating anything, man.
No, you gotta be pro-people.
Right.
There's right, and then there's wrong.
Right.
And then there's a lot of gray area.
Right. It's sort of like the Packer game the other night with Kansas City. You know, I'm only bringing this up because I'm plugging Green Bay because they beat KC. But the thing was, is a lot of my friends that are fans of both teams. They were justifying the referees' calls, whether they were good or bad.
Right.
I saw good calls and bad calls on both sides. So what are you telling me? Do you want? And I'm tying this into policing. Do you want AI to police your communities,
Right.
or do you? Because this is what I need people to understand is that we are human.
People make mistakes.
We make mistakes, and you got to live with the mistake. So if you want a perfect world where it's an AI experience, artificial intelligence experience, then you're not always going to get what you want.
Yeah, and that's never going to exist because the problem with IA is that it has no experience.
None. And it was programmed by a human.
Exactly, with flawed, most likely viewpoints, or
Right.
it's just, you always need people to think. Things constantly change, cultures change, there's understandings that people just don't get that nothing is concrete.
So it ties right back to what's the main subject of this critical thinking.
Yeah, it's
Ties right back into it.
some things, like you said, it's horrible. That's just the way it is. People hate to hear that. Sometimes I don't know if that's the word, but it's like,
What word are you referring to?
just the whole "that's the way it is." And
I never liked that.
No, because
I never liked that phrase.
it's not true.
It doesn't always have to be.
No, and because you don't want to change it or you don't want to rock the boat, it gets to stay the same, and that's not right. I wanted to ask you because when you start your career, everybody has a niche. Like, where were you really good at in your mind?
What part of my career?
Oh, just you getting in the profession, and I would say, what do you think your personal strong points were when you got in?
Well, I pride myself on my interpersonal skills. I can count on my hand how many times I really had to go physical with anybody. I was always able to de-escalate scenarios, both in managing people, managing scenarios, managing work products. I was always working with people on projects. I pride myself on that. I think that's the first step in. If I was gonna, be HR and hire personnel for an agency, I would focus more on interpersonal skills than you're big brute and you're strong and you can drive well. All that's important, but it goes right back to you have to work with the community.
Yeah, I want to throw out that what you just said is 95% of law enforcement. You have to communicate with people, and you have to know how to resolve issues.
Have to be able to resolve issues because you're going to be working with a different array of people in the community. You're going to work with distressed communities. You're going to work in gated communities. You're going to work with the personnel that that manage the city,
Right.
fire, rescue, water, everything. You just gonna have to learn how to be able to adapt to different scenarios.
Yeah, the list goes on in the medical profession, and when you go to the hospitals, you're talking to doctors,
Right.
nurses, in the
Right.
courthouse, you're talking to attorneys and judges,
Yeah.
and it goes. I think some of the most interesting things, because federal level, like going out of state, like I used to do some extradition trips and whatnot,
Right.
and going and maybe picking up a prisoner in Georgia or New Hampshire or something. It's like you get to see other parts of law enforcement.
Partner, throughout my career from like day one, I was doing extraditions all over the world, except for the western side. I was always Europe and all the islands and Colombia. I spent a lot of time in Colombia. I wish I would learn Spanish along the way, but everyone is different in how they police, but there's one common denominator in it all. How do you communicate with your co-workers, with your community, and all that ties into one critical, your critical thinking, your critical skills, and that interpersonal skills.
Do you think you can even do the job without any of those skills?
No.
I would say that it's pretty much impossible.
Most of, I wish I can get my numbers on, and if there's someone listening and they work in internal affairs, or they can share, share stats with us. A lot of the incidents that law enforcement personnel or even administrative personnel get themselves tied up into is the fact that they use their common sense.
Yeah, it happens to this day. I still routinely get, it's like, wow, this isn't new. Like, no one could think they were out of this paper bag. Like, sometimes you just have to let things go. You don't always have to
You don't always gotta win.
push an issue. And that's the thing. It's not a competition. Sometimes, you know what? I've seen a lot of people, general public, I think we even had this conversation a few days ago. It's like, sometimes, hey, you don't have a right to search my car.
Yeah.
They're right. You don't.
They don't.
You don't press it. There's nothing to press. Unless you really have something, there's nothing to press. It's that old adage from the 80s, well, what are you hiding?
Don't let your pride in the way.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not hiding anything. I don't want you looking in my car. Why should I have to subject to your perceived authority, and now you're gonna accuse me of doing something way worse? And, back in the day, well, I'm gonna call the dog. We'll call the dog.
All right, I'll be.
Yeah.
Clock's on.
Yeah, what 20 minutes? Give me something reasonable. And, it's but that's the old adage of, yeah, people do not have to let you look in their cars.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just asking and somebody says no, that's kind of it.
That's it. Write on the citation that you pulled them over for and keep it moving.
Yeah. If you got more, if they got a suspended deal or whatever, you can
Keep it
do.
moving.
Yeah, then you go from there.
Once again, not money more quarterbacking, but it's just basic critical thinking.
Yeah, and a lot of
And this is really generated to those that want to get into law enforcement. That was one of my things when I left. Before I left that year that I knew I was going to leave the last year.
Right.
I was focused in on making sure that my guys were making sure that they were getting their training. All the way up to the last day, I was telling them, make sure you get your training. And whatever knowledge, whatever experience you have, pass it on to the new guys coming. My management, my chief and marshal, they worked diligently on making sure that we had staffing, because we took a hit during COVID. And one of the things that I was always stressing to the chiefs were, this guy or this lady, they're good trainers.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that they're on the front line, making sure that the new folks are coming in, getting trained up on the procedures, not focus so much on, oh, I got to get a promotion, or I got to get out of
Right.
operations. Man, listen, all that made me who I am.
Yeah, you need to be
You need,
productive.
you need to have those experiences that you don't wanna have. You need to work in those divisions that you really don't wanna work in, because you're gonna appreciate when you get to wherever you're gonna go, and you're gonna know how to, treat people in those departments.
Everybody, your supervisor and the whole crew who will listen to this show, they know that everybody's got a specialty. Some
Everyone has a
people
specialty.
are great at certain things, and if you're a good supervisor, you know what those things are and who possesses those
Right.
skills. And you know, you can always mold people,
Right.
and the best way to do that is to realize that you do not know everything.
You don't know it.
No, and you don't have to be more important, and you don't need this whole taking credit stuff. But when you see a bad practice, and I'll give you an example of a bad practice, and I want you to give me one. Okay, I think a bad practice is cops sitting at intersections running tags.
That is a good one.
Hey, I think that is a horrible practice. It goes unchecked because that takes the thinking out of it, because things that you see on the news,
Right.
because now you don't put two and two together. I run your tag, it says you got a suspended license, or let's just say the car's stolen. Let's say it's stolen,
Okay.
and you initiate your felony stop, and this is what it is, and all of a sudden you find out that it was recovered and nobody did report, and like the people that you have subjected to all this, it's like nothing is what it seems.
I've had that where the tow agency then reported.
Yeah.
I've had that.
Yeah, but you're all
You're
running,
all
pointing
handcuffed.
guns at people, and you're on your felony stop. Like you don't know. You do not know.
Right.
You don't know if the driver has a suspended driver's license. You initiated traffic stop. It's your wife. What is your cause for the stop? That the computer, what cops look at on a computer, and I'll give you this example. This because little pet peeves. I mean, okay, folks, I'm going off now. I'll give you this example because it actually happened. It was a domestic violence injunction, and the lady gets it in court, comes straight out of the courtroom and goes out on the street and goes close to the house where the guy lives and says, "Hey, let me call this officer out here. He's over there, go serve it." The officer gets there and looks at the paper, and what do you think the officer says?
No, tell me.
I'll tell you. Well, we just looked at this and it's not in the system.
Well, you got to put it in, it's not in the system until you make the, well, actually, it wasn't entered in the system.
No, because it doesn't happen like that. It's still in the courtroom, and the clerk has to get it, and it's got to go through this whole process.
So basically what you're saying is that she just got it that morning.
Yeah.
And you should allow at least 24 hours. She was really anxious on getting that thing in the
No,
system.
that's the whole thing. It doesn't have to be in the system. She's got the actual paperwork. She came out of the court with signatures. But if you're a cop and you're going, it's not in the system, I don't know what to do with this.
You got the hard copy.
Yeah. It's like, but they go by what they see on the computer. Just like, oh, well, it shows here that it's not served or whatever. And then she's like, well, it's like the stuff is right in front of you.
Right.
Get away from the computer because it doesn't know everything. It takes a while for it to be entered in the system.
You just triggered thought. I worked in warrants, and a lot of times warrants need to be pulled out of the system.
Of course.
If someone's not doing their job, someone just got arrested, or like locals will pick up our felony warrant because the person was driving or they had an encounter with law enforcement some way or another.
Right.
And if we don't take that out of the system or enter it within a lot of time, 24 hours, now you just violate somebody's freedom.
Absolutely.
I mean,
We say, hey, carry this around with you until it's able to be taken out of the system,
Right.
so you don't get whatever. But
Right.
yeah, things that happen in real time. It's like, but you have to be aware of that. I think one of the biggest advantages ever was understanding how the court system worked. As you go through your career.
right.
Because I'll be honest, at one point when I started, once you went to jail, I didn't know what happened to you after that.
No.
I know you got a bond and there's some other shit. but then when I started working actually in
Right.
from beginning to end and seeing people go to trials and
And
for
that-
arraignments and this, that, and the other.
And
you
that
know,
goes
okay.
that goes into effect of what I was saying earlier. And this is for my deputies. who are just getting in the marshal service, don't be so fast or so quick to want to get out of operations. Learn that process.
Right. Don't
That's
believe
where it
the hype.
starts. That's where it starts. The main reason why, main reasons why the marshal service was established was to produce prisoners to court.
Right. Yeah.
Simple as that.
You
got to do your court time too.
Yeah, and you don't know because people are making people whole. It's like that's what sheriffs in all over the country, like, people don't realize that the sheriff, I mean, you're talking like Robin Hood and Sheriff Nottingham.
Yeah,
Sheriff
Nottingham.
collected taxes.
Everything.
And and what does the sheriff do these days? They still collect taxes.
We still collect.
It may look like a ticket.
Right.
It may look like a court
That's
fine.
a good point. That's a good point.
We sheriffs still collect taxes for the king that is now the court.
Right.
And everything else is the calls for service and all that. That's more it's man-made.
Right.
It wasn't not
collateral duties.
Yeah, when you look at the actual duties of a sheriff in any county, it doesn't include calls for service. That's all budget related things and based on populations, but the actual duties, you supply the court, protection for the dignitaries,
which is what we do.
You execute writs, warrants, and everything that's classified as a
civil.
writ. Yeah.
Well, yeah, civil. It all falls underneath that.
And that's it. That's what the sheriff does.
Whenever I have to explain what a U.S. Marshal do, I always go back to, well, we're sort of like the sheriff of the United States. The sheriff, a sheriff takes care of the county.
Right.
We take care of all the states and the union. So it's really no different. It's a good segue into what we're talking was. It's a good comparison.
And that's the thing. Marshals are, like I said, they're the police for the United States. Right. Just like the Capitol Police, they are the bailiffs for the District of Columbia.
Hats off to the Capitol Police. I gotta give it to them, man. They went through some things during Jan 6. Not gonna get too dabbed into that, but they do great work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do great work. And if anybody's looking for a career in law enforcement, they are hiring.
Yeah, and I actually talked to a couple that were down on vacation before I did retire, where I used to work out on the touristy section, and got to get some insight from actually somebody who was on scene, and the support personnel that came in and kind of get their versions of what happened, and it gets back to where this show started is. Let me see the body cam footage, because when was the last time you actually that anybody wanted to hear what a law enforcement officer had to say as testimony?
That's rare.
Yeah, because one of the guys, and like you said, not getting into it, but he literally said, yeah, nobody wanted to hear what we had to say. And they had the hearings, they had the January 6th hearings. Did you know anybody who heard any testimony? I've heard people, I didn't have time to listen. It's like, nobody cares.
Well,
I'm just going to say nobody cares because I haven't heard anybody who cared.
Sometimes you really don't want to hear a story.
Yeah, well, and that's fine, but don't act like it doesn't exist. And
that's the reason why I brought it up. Because, in every story, there is some truths in there. Yeah. And there may be a lot of truths in there. So, maybe some people didn't want to talk about that.
But I noticed that it's also one of the very first cases that I've seen that all of a sudden the video isn't good enough anymore.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
I'm plugging again the CERT teams again. Mm-hmm. The Marshal Service provides CERT teams for those folks over there at Capitol Police, and a few other agencies also provided. I'm very big on mental health. I'm very big on that, and I want to make sure that that those different components of what we do is plugged in. So hats off to anybody that works in the critical incident response team, psychologists, social workers, everyone that's helping the mental aspect for our police aid, for our officers.
Oh, and it's huge, and you mark my words, I'm going to say this today, and it probably won't be another thing for another few years, but it's funny how in my experience and wherever I've heard any officer who mentions anything about PTSD,
It's real.
you know, it's real, but it's not addressed at the same token. You know, a lot of people, mental health is it's gotten. I'm gonna say it's gotten worse. It's more on the radar now,
Right.
and because there are more things happening in the world.
Well, it's like what we were saying before, we all, people look at us as, another cliche, alpha.
Yeah.
But you know what, we feel also.
Yeah, you can't, when we got hired, I mean, alpha males and alpha females or whatever, that was a thing, but to be honest, today, to be a cop, you have to be an alpha and a beta. You can't be
You gotta be both.
one.
You gotta be able to put that hat on, take that hat,
Yeah.
put another hat on, you have to be able to do it.
Yeah, that old, my uncle, my uncle, retired back in like 1989, and back then it was straight out alpha, hey, do what I say or else.
Or else
And-
get dumped.
Yeah, and that's.
They had the blackjacks back then. Man.
He had a black.
You know, those aren't issued anymore.
No, he was knocking people out. Yeah, and those are not his story. Those are other people's stories. I mean, back in the day, you get hired out of Vietnam,
Right.
And
I think that we're only bringing that up, and we don't want anybody to think that we're, slamming on law enforcement and tactics, but we've grown.
it's forever changing.
And we've grown, and I'm proud of being part of an establishment that has matured,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to critical thinking.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to have hands thrown on them.
Nope. And yeah, not only that.
Talk to folks.
Talk to folks, but did you ever really notice? I don't want to lose my train of thought there, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's forever changing. It's one of those careers where it's not like being an accountant. And if you're an accountant, the tax code might change. Like 1 year, you might get this or that. But law
Every
enforcement,
administration.
yeah, law enforcement changes every single day.
Daily.
There's always something that you didn't know that wasn't a thing yesterday.
Right.
And that trend will continue. But when you act like people should have known things
Mhm.
that they don't know, and a whole other segment will be like the mass shootings, school shootings,
Right.
and
Yeah.
hats off to people who
We'll
manage critical incidents.
We'll go up in a place where they know that they might get killed. Hey man, you better recognize that, because that's what we're doing now.
But look at the trend. I think I might have mentioned it another time, but there was a day where something like that happened, and it was called "You hold what you got and wait for SWAT."
Oh, that's funny because when I left Orange County, that was early 2000.
Mhm.
That's what you were doing. You was holding, and you were holding that, or you was waiting for a deputy to come back you up. Now you gotta go.
If you went in there and did what they're asking you to do now, back then, you'd have been instantly fired. Fired on the spot.
Fired.
And what were you thinking exactly? But that's
What are you, Superman?
yeah, that analogy is to show how much things have changed. And if you get sucked in that bubble and you don't pick your head out of that rabbit hole to look around and see what's going on, and you implore those same tactics.
So basically what we're saying is stay up on your policy changes, make contact with your DEAs and your AUSAs regularly, because laws change, procedures change. You don't want to be made an example of.
Pay attention to your pronouns. You don't want to offend anybody.
Pay attention to that.
But that's just making a point again.
That's
Things
just making things change.
And it's like what was acceptable yesterday is not acceptable today.
It's like what did Fat Joe say? Those was prices yesterday. Those prices aren't good today.
Exactly. and if that's your defense, like no, well that's the rhetoric today. Well, you should have known.
You should have known.
And
it's not my fault you didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and to some of the show, we got a few minutes left, and it's like that's what being a supervisor turned into, was keeping track of everything and
Right.
telling people. I mean, some of you guys get, because they're task oriented. They're
Right.
doing what they do, and if
Right.
something changes and you see it, and you say, "Hey guys, and girls, we can't do this anymore. I want you guys to start doing it this way."
Right.
You get a bunch of grumblings, but they're not looking out. It's like, it's not because I want to be a Rick, I just wanted you to
I
make
just
sure
want
that
you to know.
you keep your job and you do things,
Right.
you know.
Like I did, one of the things that I noticed that I had to struggle with during, I don't know, but I was going to use a word that we shouldn't be talking about. Funding actually. Just can't abuse gas. You can't abuse your vehicles. You have to maintain and take care of things. Budgeting. If I give you a allotment of money to use for your fuel costs, we got to keep that under the cost.
Exactly.
Oh, I told you. So don't be mad if the chief come to you and say, "Hey, why are you going over your allotted amount for this month?" Well, chief, I told him. What do you want to do? You want to ground him for a little while?
Yeah, sometimes things are what they are. I mean, it's
What
kind
they
of,
are.
I'm sorry, you just need to cough up some more money from somewhere, because
It don't
this
work
is
like that.
the cost of doing business.
I had a chief that was, we got to be good stewards of the government money.
Yeah.
We have to be good stewards.
That sounds good
Yeah.
in principle, but that's not always
Yeah.
feasible.
Yeah. But we manage.
Yeah, but and based on things we just